Today in the episode, big losses for Russia. Ukraine hits 5 airfields and destroys 15 military planes in 1 year. A dead end for the Kremlin. Massive manpower losses and obsolete infrastructure signal Russia's defeat. A formal invitation or propaganda? Moscow claims readiness to host Zelensky with guaranteed safety. 5 Russian airfields were hit, and 15 aircraft of the occupation army were destroyed, among them 11 fighters and bombers, 3 helicopters, and 1 transport plane. The Security Service of Ukraine reported on the operations carried out and long-range strikes on Russian territory over the past year. The Security Service of Ukraine noted that, along with the equipment, ammunition, and fuel depots at the airfields, were burned. As a result, Russia's losses exceeded $1 billion. The Russian army has once again suffered aviation losses. Yesterday, the Russian military lost a fighter jet. The report from the General Staff of Ukraine states that 1 enemy aircraft was destroyed. However, according to Andriy Kovalenko, the head of the Center for Countering Disinformation at the National Security and Defense Council of Ukraine, there may be 2 downed fighters, a Su-30 and a Su-34. At the same time, information about the death of the Su-34 crew was circulating on Russian social media. Russia has lost more than 1,200,000 military personnel in the war against Ukraine. These are the figures from the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine as of January 28th. Experts from the Center for Strategic and International Studies in Washington believe that over the past year, Russian forces lost 425,000 people killed and wounded, or an average of about 35,000 per month.
Despite claims of increasing combat momentum in Ukraine, data shows that Russia is paying an extraordinary price for minimal gains and is in decline as a major power. Since February 2022, Russian troops have suffered losses, more than any other major state in any war since the Second World War, from a report by the Center for Strategic and International Studies in Washington.
China supplies Russia with equipment for the production of Oreshnik and Iskander missiles. The Telegraph reports this. Journalists recall that in January, Moscow launched an Oreshnik strike on Lviv, which is located near the border with Poland. At the same time, the Telegraph writes that specialized production machines are used to create the warheads. Ukrainian intelligence discovered this specific lathe at the Russian state-owned Votkinsk plant. This very plant produces the Oreshnik missile, as well as Iskander-M ballistic missiles and Topol-M intercontinental missiles. Russia is conducting a mass recruitment of foreign nationals to fight in its war against Ukraine, utilizing fictitious employment agencies and semi-criminal labor migration networks. According to Western media reports, at least 18,000 citizens from 126 Asian countries were sent to the front lines last year. Experts note that these recruitment tactics often bear the hallmarks of human trafficking and constitute a violation of international humanitarian law. Despite these efforts to bolster their ranks, the situation on the front remains difficult for Russia, and analysts suggest the Kremlin is unlikely to turn the tide of the conflict through these methods alone.
More than 1,200,000 military personnel have been lost by Russia in the war against Ukraine. This is data from the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine as of 28 January. Experts from the Center for Strategic and International Studies in Washington estimate that last year, Russian troops lost 425,000 people killed and wounded, or on average about 35,000 per month.
Despite claims of battlefield momentum in Ukraine, the data shows that Russia is paying an extraordinary price for minimal gains and is in decline as a major power. Since February 2022, Russian forces have suffered nearly 1.2 million casualties, more losses than any major power in any war since World War II, from a report by the Center for Strategic and International Studies.
Russia is trying to replenish its army's losses with foreign mercenaries, reports the Center for Countering Disinformation. According to Western media, in 2025, Russia sent at least 18,000 citizens from 126 Asian countries to the front. More than 3,300 of them have already been killed, with the average recruit dying within 72 hours.
Recruitment often bears signs of human trafficking and violates international humanitarian law. Recruiters promise legal work, high salaries, and civilian positions. Recruits are given contracts in Russian that they do not understand, after which their passports are taken away and they are sent to war. At the same time, the Kremlin is conducting aggressive propaganda, trying to create an image of Russia as an anti-colonial ally of Africa and the global South. However, Moscow's actions are directly opposite. They use citizens of global South countries as a resource for its aggressive war. From a message by the Center for Countering Disinformation at the National Security and Defense Council of Ukraine on Telegram.
With monthly losses of 35,000 soldiers, attracting foreigners will not change the situation, experts believe. Therefore, the main emphasis in replenishing the army will be on Russians.
Right now in Russia, the situation is difficult. The consequences of the war are hitting the Russian economy. Business is suffering from the war, enterprises are closing, employees are being all laid off. And the only way for Russians to earn money is the army. They sign a contract with the Russian Ministry of Defense, join the Russian army, and go to war against Ukraine.
The war is exhausting the Russian economy. In 2025, Russia's GDP growth slowed to less than 1%, and industrial production is declining. The Center for Strategic and International Studies in Washington emphasizes that Russia is rapidly losing its status as a so-called great power in most military, economic, and technological categories, retaining only its nuclear arsenal.
Russian manufacturing is declining, consumer demand is weakening, inflation remains stubbornly high, and the country faces a labor crunch. Economic growth slowed to 0.6% in 2025, and Russia continues to fall behind in key technologies such as AI. Russia had a grand total of 0 companies in the top 100 list of technology companies in the world, as measured by market capitalization, from a report by the Center for Strategic and International Studies. And now new financial reserves will be poured in, regardless of problems in the civilian sector, regardless of problems with business, regardless of problems with the budget. And the Kremlin will maintain the flow of those willing to solve their financial problems by signing a contract with the Ministry of Defense. These new recruits won't fight much, but Russia's human resources will still be found.
Earlier, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky stated that the strategic goal of Ukrainian units is to achieve such a level of losses among Russian troops that it exceeds Russia's ability to replenish personnel. The president emphasized that the main tool for achieving this goal remains unmanned systems of all types, as well as systematic analysis of combat operations and accounting for gained experience. Reported by Victoria Chistukina, UATV News.
Ukrainian concessions of territory of Donbass would be a strategic mistake, stated the Institute for the Study of War. The United States is reportedly pushing Ukraine to cede the remainder of Donetsk region to Russia in exchange for U.S. security guarantees. But the truth is, Russia is unlikely to seize quickly or easily, militarily, the territory of Donbass, stated ISW. Analytics added, the Russian military command continues to present demonstrable lies and exaggerations about Russian battlefield gains.
The Russian military command has been boasting about the seizure of small, rural villages and presenting these seizures as alleged evidence of the prowess of the Russian military to further the false narrative that Russian victory in Ukraine is inevitable. The seizure of small rural villages only a few square kilometers in area does not portend Russia's ability to seize the much larger and heavily fortified cities in Ukraine's fortress belt in Donetsk Oblast in the near future. The Institute for the Study of War on X.
Ukrainian military personnel have refuted yet another fake claim by Putin's general. Gerasimov, the chief of the general staff of the aggressor state, claimed that street battles are allegedly taking place in the village of Kudkivka in the Kharkiv region in the Kupiansk direction, and that Russian soldiers are supposedly clearing this settlement. The 16th Corps of the Armed Forces of Ukraine pointed out that Gerasimov's statement does not correspond to reality. The defenders noted that the armed forces of Ukraine fully control Kudkivka and have not allowed any loss of positions. Small infantry groups of the occupiers are trying to infiltrate this village, but Ukrainian defenders detect and eliminate them. A withdrawal of the Ukrainian army from Donbass will not stop Russia, according to analysts from the Institute for the Study of War. Experts note that the Kremlin's public signals regarding an alleged readiness for peace are merely a cover for Moscow's true strategic objectives. The Institute reports that Russia's ultimate goals remain the total capitulation of Ukraine and a fundamental overhaul of Europe's security architecture. Statements from Moscow continue to indicate a persistent desire to force NATO back to its 1997 borders. Furthermore, the Kremlin remains committed to replacing Ukraine's democratic government with a pro-Russian puppet regime. If President Volodymyr Zelensky wishes to meet with Vladimir Putin, he is welcome to travel to Moscow. This so-called invitation was made by Ushakov, an aide to the Russian dictator. According to him, Putin has stated several times that if Zelensky is genuinely prepared for a meeting, the invitation to the Russian capital remains open. And Ushakov went as far as to offer security guarantees for the Ukrainian president, should he make the trip, what is actually a part of Kremlin's propaganda. Furthermore, Ushakov noted that Putin has already discussed the possibility of a meeting with the Ukrainian leader during talks with U.S. President Donald Trump. The next negotiations between Russia and Ukraine will take place without the USA. This was stated by Secretary of State Marco Rubio at a meeting of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. He noted that currently a general agreement on security guarantees for Ukraine has already been reached. And he added that Washington will play its role in these guarantees.
There's a lot of talk about security guarantees. And it's something that there's general agreement about now with the case of Ukraine. But those security guarantees basically involve the deployment of a handful of European troops, primarily French in the UK, and then a U.S. backstop. But in fact, the security guarantee is the U.S. backstop. It is not and I'm not diminishing the fact that some countries in Europe are willing to place troops in a post-war Ukraine. What I'm pointing out is that is irrelevant without the U.S. backstop.
That's all for today's News Digest. Stay informed, stay critical, like the video, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. See you next time.